I think that we're live right now. All right. Well, hello, everybody. This is going to be a fun special episode. We have, or at least it says that we're live. Yay! We have Ugly Old Goat. We have Tyler, Ugly. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am going to tease out war stories from you old geezers. Ugly, how are you doing?
Just looking forward to this. I think Tyler and I are going to have lots of fun. We already talked a little bit about our old war stories, so there'll be a wealth of information here. We might just have to do it regularly for short amounts of time because we're not going to cover all we can cover today. I can tell that already.
Yay! Sounds good. Sounds good. And Tyler, how are you?
I've really been looking forward to this. Ugly and I have never met. I know, Leah, you had the opportunity to meet Ugly on the cruise and got to know him. And Tone is really looks up to Ugly, his experience, but his trading acumen. But the big thing I was interested in is our experience. The two of us are the same age, but I'm the old man here. I'm many hours older than Ugly Old Goat. And we got started about the same time in the business. And it turns out we got started in a very similar fashion, which I only learned 15 minutes ago. So this is going to be really fun for me personally. I know I'm going to learn a lot. And I think anybody listening in, particularly some of the younger crowd who's are all trying to learn what this means to take cash, fiat money, and try to make it grow through investments or speculating or position trading. Well, you're about to hear from two guys that have done it for 4 decades, and we've made a lot of mistakes. And we've also done a lot of things right, and we've learned a lot. And today what we're going to do is we're going to try to share that with everybody just by having a relaxed, sitting back, listening to Leah directing where she wants to take us, and we'll answer any and all questions. So this will be fun.
All right.
And Ugly, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Before we start, would you mind doing your dance?
Oh, yeah, I forgot all about that. Here we go. Hopefully, you've read what I've written about. And we need to have, the Bitcoin standard needs to have some of the BitConnect enthusiasm, okay? We're right on the issues. We know where we're going, but we need some of that BitConnect stuff, okay? So here's what we do. We go, hodl, save, build, sound money.
I love it. That's great. That's great.
It's so good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ugly. All right. Let's kick this off. So I'm going to put you guys on the spot because I don't know if you know about this. Actually, you do right prior to this show, but I'm actually going to tease out some gold and silver. So I don't know if other people know this, but I know one of Tyler's secrets and of yours, Uglies, which you talked about on Tone's show, and that's that you both have a very significant background actually in gold and silver. Now, Ugly, you said on that discussion with Tone recently that you used to have a gold and silver business, okay? And that's interesting for someone, in my opinion, who's gotten into Bitcoin, because there's a lot of people like Saifedean, and the three of us have actually talked about it a lot. You've written about it extensively, has taken time to talk about the gold standard, and lots of gold and silver bugs have actually moved into Bitcoin, like you guys. So let's explore this. It seems coincidental that our two geezers on the show, sorry guys, I said it, who have been around for a long time, and both of you guys have significant experiences in gold and silver again. So I'm gonna start with you, Ugly. Can you tell us what you did in gold and silver, what you were trying to accomplish when you started your business in gold and silver? And I'm gonna throw a third, and why did this get you into Bitcoin?
Okay. Well, hey, I have a question first for Tyler. Do you remember when you were 5 years old what a nickel would buy?
Yeah, actually, I do. I remember not that early, but I remember going to the Holiday Theater and paying a nickel to see a movie. It then went up to 25 cents. I also remember gasoline at 25 cents.
I actually can remember gasoline at 12 cents.
Wow.
And I
Unbelievable.
bought it when I was able to drive it at 18 cents.
Unbelievable.
But what I was thinking about is when I was a kid, do you remember Three Musketeers?
Sure.
Three Musketeers, you can split it 3 ways. Because it was a great big old candy bar, and you paid a nickel for it. You had 2 friends, you'd break it into 3 pieces, and you'd all have some candy.
Yep, that's right.
So, anyway, and I remember nickel cokes too. But I think this is my grandfather. He had a construction company. I think he kind of subsidized that for his workers. I think they were actually dimes. So.
Well, that's a very good point, though, because what we're talking about being in this space, meaning having an interest in gold and silver, having an interest in sound money, and being able to give examples like that, where back in after the end of World War II, you could buy a house for $4,000. You could buy a car for $500. They had things called penny candy stores, and you never paid more than a penny. You would say, I want this, 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 and this. And all of a sudden, we've got these things selling for $200,000 for a house, $20,000 for a car, sort of at the low end. And we tend to think, wow, everything's just getting more and more expensive. But that's not true. What's happening is the dollars we use to buy all of those things have lost 95% of their value since World War II, which is 20 to 1. So you take any of the things you're talking about, Three Musketeers, movie theaters, houses, cars, multiply what it used to be times 20, and that's what you pay today. And that's not because things have gotten more expensive. It's because fiat money does not work.
Yeah, friends picked used to say I could buy a suit of clothes at the turn of the century for an ounce of gold, and I can still buy a fine suit of clothes for an ounce of gold. So it's not that the gold is worth anymore, it's simply a store of value. And of course, you and I both remember when all the coins were actual silver. The nickel was a nickel. And the dime was a dime, silver dime, half a dollar, quarters that were all silver. I mean, I remember going to Las Vegas and they played, dollar slots with real silver dollars.
Yeah.
And I was from Missouri, and I remember as a kid they had mills, little wooden mills that the state would issue, because this tax then sales tax was under 1%. It was, it was like, so you actually had 1/100 of a mill. Well, they were red, and then a 5 mil was a green little wooden token, and that's how you paid your sales tax. And of course, now how much are we paying on sales tax? I know in California it's about 10%, and most of the country is well over 5%. So, that's the difference.
Well, back in the days when you got interested in gold and silver, were you thinking in those terms? Were you thinking about sound money, or was there something else that you got interested in?
My mentor, and he was introduced to me through my father, and I just read the guy, and he was just fascinated me to know him, and that's E.C. Harwood. And he was the founder of the American Institute for Economic Research. And I regularly link the lost art of commercial banking to my readers, because he understood, basically he outlined the history of banking and how a gold standard developed. It actually developed privately with banks, and they issued the specie. And of course, back in the day when I was there was this argument between the monetarists and the Keynesians, and of course the Austrians, who were really held it. I mean, I can't believe how many people are Austrian who can hold that claim now, because back in the 70s, Ludwig von Mises was not. He was. You couldn't help but respect him, but he was kind of treated like you are, Tyler. It just he was. Oh, what day were you were born on April 1st, right? So
April 1st, 1949.
Well, that's why everybody thinks that Tyler's a joke.
Yeah, that's right.
But
and most of them are right.
Yeah, and so that's how I got into it. And I remember the first 100 ounce of gold I bought. I think it was at $120. And then I started a gold and silver deposit business, and then I started minting gold coins. And the first coin that I minted was the Harwood gold piece, because he was my mentor. And I respected him so much, and he taught me so much, and he outlined what banking is, and that privately the money supply is expandable, because banks used to expand the money supply to producers and so they could pay their employers and pay their suppliers, but this was self-liquidating commercial paper. So it's a non-inflationary money creation, a non-inflationary money creation. And that's how banking, sound commercial banking, works. So you don't need to be adding more money into the money supply. And that was basically Milton Friedman's argument. Well, we'll just have a fixed supply of 5% a year, whatever the magic figure is. No, the marketplace will figure that out. If you have sound commercial free market banking. And that's what I see coming eventually with the Bitcoin standard. And it's going to have to develop. And like I said, the wonderful thing about what's happening now is people are going to wake up and learn just how wrong the crypto world is. And it's very important, I think, right now that we distinguish the gold standard, the Bitcoin standard, and the Bitcoin standard bears. I call myself now a Bitcoin standard bear. I'm not a maximalist, but I do want to hold the standard of the Bitcoin standard. And that's how I'm going to distinguish myself from the crypto world. I want nothing to do with this crypto world. It's really caused a huge amount of harm. And that's what we're washing out now. This is watching a video where Tone was on, but he was on with all these other guys, and they really don't get it. They think that these other standards are just fine, and they don't understand the difference between competing on a standard and creating new standards. And of course, they have a huge self-interest in it, because they're creating this money and enriching themselves from it, but it's most of it's fraudulent at best. It's just done with good intentions and out of ignorance, and at worst it's an out and out fraud. So this is what we got to clean out. This is where we're going, and it was. I've said it all along. We need the help. I mean, we don't know what the market's going to do. I'm the last one that knows where the market's going. But this is the healthiest thing that's going on right now. And the whole question is, how much is it going to affect Bitcoin? One thing that I wanted to talk about today is that coin market cap, because I think it's very important that we start saying, I think what you're going to really start seeing is a resurrection of the dominance of Bitcoin. And I think that when this bottom comes, it can come very quickly, and it will. It's only going to be Bitcoin that's going to bottom out.
That's a great point. And the reason we started back with gold and silver, just in terms of our experiences, there was no Bitcoin, there was no crypto. People 20 years later, back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, started thinking in those terms. I talk about this wonderful book called Cryptonomicon that was written, I believe, in 1991. It sort of predicted that something was about to happen, marrying cryptography with some kind of a standard in terms of the financial world. It was actually a novel, but it was brilliantly written, had a lot to do with the cryptography during World War II and game theory that came afterwards. But the reason we wanted to start on that topic is because when you were learning about investing and I was learning about investing, the only thing we could talk about is fiat, because in 1971, that was the last vestige of something. It wasn't a pure gold standard, but it was a gold standard coupled with the dollar that the world could use and rely on. And for a while, it worked fairly well, and then it didn't work at all, and then it fell apart under Richard Nixon. So then from 1971 until 2010, basically, it was a free-for-all. Who could print the most money and try to turn it into growth? And we did a great job in the United States because we ran deficits every year since 1961 under Kennedy until 2.5 brief years under Clinton, where we had a tiny, tiny surplus, but then that got swallowed up very quickly after that. We've been running deficits ever since. And that put the world in this funny situation where they looked at this country that used to be one of the two pillars of the monetary reserve system, because there were both gold and the dollar, and they were interchangeable. And now all of a sudden there was no more gold after 1971. It could float in the market, but there was an attack on it by the IMF and by the US Treasury. And I talked about that, and Leah talked about it in her article about why Bitcoin, basically. And what happened is every time the Treasury and the International Monetary Fund tried to dump gold, tons and tons of gold on the market to keep the price down from 1972 all the way to 1979, every time the price went up at the auction and it would sell out. And then they would do it 6 weeks later and dump a ton of gold, many tons of gold onto the market. And the price kept going up all the way from $35 up to $884 in 1979 and going into 1980. And I was involved with what the Hunt brothers were trying to achieve, cornering the silver market, which is a story for another time because it would take too long. But I became enmeshed in what in the world are the governments of the world afraid of with this thing called gold and this subsidiary called silver. And a guy came along, Paul Volcker. He killed inflation. He killed the interest rate hyperwave that had started back in the 1940s, and it peaked right at under Volcker's rule as the head of the Federal Reserve, 1979, 80, 81, and 82. He pushed us into a recession, but he killed inflation, and he killed high interest rates that had been going up for 40 years. And we started the biggest bull market in bond market history that just ended several years ago. But the reason I'm going over that again, and many of our listeners have heard that before, is if you want to understand what Ugly is talking about and what Tone is talking about, what I'm talking about, in terms of why we believe so much in this Bitcoin experiment, not in crypto,
Right. Bitcoin alone.
just Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin experiment is because the things in the past that were able to constrain governments are no longer. And that's why I have recently said on the Kaiser report, you cannot underestimate how powerful this debt credit cycle has become since 2008 and 9, when we finally got out of that recession because we and all the other central banks dropped interest rates down to 0. You cannot overstate it. You sound like a lunatic when you try to describe how bad the problem is in terms of not being able to pay back all of this debt on a worldwide basis. So one of the 4 things I believe is a possible solution to this problem, mathematical problem of not being able to pay back the interest on the debt, let alone the debt itself, is number 1, Bitcoin. Number 2, return to a gold standard. Number 3, we can grow our way out of the problem. And number 4 is we can default on the debt. Now, number 3 sounds great, grow our way out of the problem. Everybody votes, yes, let's do that. But it's not happening. We tried the experiment here in the United States over the last 2 years under Trump, and now there's tremendous pushback. And for political reasons, the Trump administration has lost the House. We'll see what happens. But that's as close as we have come in 40 years to a pro-growth economy, and it's only occurring in one country, which happens to be the largest country. So I don't mean to ramble on about all that, Ugly, but I just wanted to lay out why it's so important to start back in the 70s, start back with what a Three Musketeer bar costs, what houses used to cost, what cars used to cost, what the cost of living is, the strength of the dollar relative to other currencies, but the big question of debt. And that takes us from the 1970s into the peak in 1980 of interest rates, the bottom in interest rates just 3 years ago. Now everybody knows rates are headed up again, but we've got this new kid on the block. And the new kid on the block is called Bitcoin. And
Yes, and the people, the next wave, and this is my thought, that you're talking about the growth economy. It's possible now. And it's going to come from the Bitcoin entrepreneurs. And that's how I've distinguished it. There's entrepreneurs that have Bitcoin, and there's entrepreneurs that don't have Bitcoin. And the people, you know, back in the day, back in 2013, I used to give Bitcoin away, and, you know, people didn't know what to do with it. A lot of them, you know, they call me when it got to be 20,000. What do I do now? I said, I didn't even know I gave you something. You know, if you gave $20 worth, it's worth $1,500 now, you know. But the people that did hodl are now, we're holding the cards. And we're not subject to any jurisdiction. So if a jurisdiction is not friendly, we can move out of it quickly. But my whole thing is
that's a very, very important point. And it has not been discussed enough, but you started off by saying that growth is possible, even though economically we don't see it in the world. We've seen 1.5% kind of growth, even with 0% interest rates and negative interest rates, except in one example, people point to China, but remember, China was growing at 14 and 15% per year GDP, and then 12 and 13, and then 10 and 11, and then 8 and 9, and now 6 and 7 and going down. Yes, it's still a big number, but it's shrinking quickly. The only place that has shown any real growth has been in the US, where we've been able over a 24-month period to double GDP, almost treble it, up over 4%. And I just read something this afternoon that it looks like we're coming in at 29% corporate profits for the quarter, as opposed to 22%, which was huge for all of last year, and the possibility of adding another 9 percentage points to that in the fourth quarter, which would be record-breaking earnings on the part of corporations. Now, I don't want to get into a political debate, but my point is that other than that, the growth that Ugly was just talking about seems impossible on an economic basis. But he just made the comment, and I'd like you to expand on that, because I think it's so brilliant, that growth is possible because of Bitcoin. And then you said there are entrepreneurs, these people that have built these incredible companies, incredible ideas, not just in terms of technology,
but wealth producers. It's the wealth producers. Bitcoin is not for the unbanked. It's not. And that's the stupidest argument. It's hit some altruistic, button on people. I want to do the good thing. The best thing you can do is employ people, give them productive work. But how many people do you hire that, I've given Bitcoin, they can't hold it. No matter, when I first came down here, there's a lot, I live in Mexico, and there's a lot of people that have been deported and they can't go back, but they're essentially were raised in the United States, and adjusting to the Mexican economy is a big obstacle for them. And it was, for me to adjust too, it was, because I thought, well, initially, it's not fair to be paid, but they don't understand that, people live on $100 a week down here. That's the norm. And I was paying this guy, a doctor's wage down here is, 20 to 30 grand in dollars. Okay. And he was getting doctor wages, okay? But every week he came back, he was broke, and I had to give him advances and so, banks, it's possible that there's, and I know, like my wife is when there's people that, are entrepreneurs, and they're not wealthy, but those are the people that you can bring into Bitcoin, and they're going to get it. But for the vast majority of people, they don't have a bank account for a reason, at least in the United States. Okay. And so, so the new wealth is going to be created by the producers. And I don't know what's going to be produced. Okay. There's an unlimited number of wants and needs, but we need a standard to do business on. And the people down here in Mexico that I've met that are entrepreneurs and they understand Bitcoin, they're wonderful people to do business with. They really are. And once you can explain it to them, and actually it was one of your shows, and I never could find the show, but you emphasized that the number one quality of Bitcoin is it's unconfiscatable. I said, wow, that's it. And as soon as I picked up on that, and I talked to a guy, somebody that I'm in business with down here, and I say, look, tell me what you own that can't be taken from you. Tell me what you have that can't be confiscated. And they start thinking, I say, everything that I own can be taken. I said, that's the value of Bitcoin. It's the only thing that can't be taken. Now, my home now is in Ensenada, Mexico. And so I am in have Bitcoin. I'm looking to invest in the economy here. And so that's what we're doing. I'm setting up, so I'm an entrepreneur, and people that are in business here, they need to protect themselves. They need to have that unconfiscatable asset. Now everybody I do business with, they all have bank accounts. They're in business. They're building houses. You know, they put in windows, you know, any number of businesses down here, but they have bank accounts. They understand what's going on. But when you start to explain to them, hey, this is unconfiscated, this is the only asset you have that can't be taken by somebody. You know, they break into your house, they're not going to get your Bitcoin. The only way you're going to take your Bitcoin is through the wrench act. You know, they have to threaten you with torture. And even that's probably not going to work. So that's where this is, and the new wealth is not going to be anything that's even going to be measurable on a macroeconomic scale. It's just going to happen from just like Bitcoin happened. The new growth is going to happen like Bitcoin happened. And that's where we're going with this. This is why I'm so excited about it. This is why we should be, why Bitcoin has such a huge potential. And this is why, I've made a prediction that very quickly, within 5 years, Tone Bay's Unconfiscatable Conference will be the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world. And he said, well, I don't want to be that big. I said, you're going to have to be that big, Tone. That's where we're going with this.
That's a great point. The whole concept of unconfiscatability sounds, so out there, particularly for an American audience. I'm so pleased that Leah and I have been exposed to clients all over the world that tell us very different stories than we hear here in the United States. Most of the people that tell the stories about the US and the government, FDIC and SIPC, SIPC, and savings and loan insurance and the Pension Benefit Guarantee Association, they've got a reason to be optimistic. But at the same time, you have to understand the scope of the problem on a worldwide basis of what fiat has done to the world of macroeconomics. And the fact that starting with Greenspan, and then with Bernanke, and then with Yellen, and now with Powell, these brilliant individuals, and they are, and we are very fortunate to have had them at this point in history to come up with these highly unusual ways of keeping the game going. And we can argue all day if they had the legal authority to do what they have done for the last 18 years. I doubt it very much. It does not show up in any of the literature or going back to 1913 in terms of the establishment of the Federal Reserve. But we are very fortunate that they were able to cobble together these unusual programs by dropping interest rates down to zero and then encouraging central banks around the world to do the same thing in order to keep the growth engine running. But at the same time, after Leah and I did some tweets about the fact that we wouldn't be here today in terms of the financial system if they had not done what they did. Each one of them in turn, facing different problems than their predecessor did and different problems than their successor was about to face. But in each case, they pulled the right levers and they did the right things. But the second part of that story is each one of them in turn made the world a much more dangerous place after they had done what they had done. And they've created bubbles around the world in assets. And we started with the mortgage and real estate bubble that then became the stock market bubble that popped in 07, 08, and 09. And now we've got another stock market bubble, and it's quickly spreading into real estate again, depending on where in the world you look. But it's all based on the same thing, asset bubbles, because central banks have been put in a position where no one will challenge them on the next steps they have taken and are taken. Now, we don't have time to get into the implications of that other than what Ugly just told us, which is he is a big believer in Bitcoin because Bitcoin offers, with a slap in the face to all traditional economists and economic systems, an overnight ability to change the way we do business. And at some point in the future, I believe that that will come to fruition, because none of the other three things that I suggested, which is a gold standard, default on the debt, or growing out of the problem, is going to be sufficient in a timely enough manner to take care of the problem. Now, as Ugly knows, and as Leah knows, and all of our listeners know, I'm a bit of an oddball in terms of my investment thesis, which is always, don't tell me what to buy, tell me when to buy it. I loved gold and silver in the 1970s, but I hated it for the next 25 years. I do not hodl anything. I believe that every trend will come to an end, and you must be looking for the end of a trend to step aside of any asset class, which is the only reason, even though I'm a big believer in Bitcoin, that in December of 2017, I got out of all my GBTC for my friends and my family and some clients, and we've been out ever since because of what Ugly suggested earlier to me, which was we need to clean out the ecosystem. It's not Bitcoin that's the problem. It's the other 2,800 projects that are all inferior to Bitcoin, but the world doesn't know that. They can't separate the two. Even regulators cannot separate the two. And as long as you've got 2,200 inferior products continually failing, continually being unable to fulfill what they promised to their investors, as long as you've got people that have created ICOs, forking off of those ICOs and setting up new projects and abandoning what they had promised was better than Bitcoin, we are going to be in a bear market until we clear all of that out. And because of that, even though out of all asset classes I've ever studied, nothing comes close to being able to fulfill this promise of not only fungibility, but unconfiscatability and store of value, and a thing I call transportation, meaning from point X to point Y, very easily and inexpensively without a third party intervening and taking part of that deal between Ugly and myself, or between Leah and Ugly, someone else intervening in the form of an institution. Nothing compares to Bitcoin. But that does not mean, from a price point of view, that prices are going to go up from here. I believe, as you know, because of Hyperwave, that we've got a long ways to go to the downside, but it has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It has to do with everything else, everything from the wallets to the exchanges to the regulators to the con artists to the Ponzi schemes. All of that needs to be cleaned out. And after it does, I will gladly do what Tone has done and what Ugly does, which is you simply hang on to it, take it off the market, because there's only going to be 21 million of these things, And we've already gone through a vast majority of them already. They've already been issued and are being held. And because of that, that is the pure definition of sound money.
All right, I'm unmuted. I'm going to jump in for 1 second, you two genius goats. So Tyler mentioned a couple things. Ugly, you mentioned a couple things, and then I'm going to turn it back to you, Ugly. Tyler and both of you actually mentioned the necessity to cleanse the systems. Cleanse the system of, I think Tyler and I are a little bit more intense on what it needs to be cleansed from, pretty much all scammy alts, but Bitcoin is king specifically. Now you've brought up another point, well, and to Tyler's point, yes, we are bearish. Everybody likes to call us perma bears right now, but that's due to the fundamentals and specifically also what Tyler was talking about of that the ecosystem, we're having a difficult time right now of being able to differentiate between Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto ecosystem. Now, Ugly, you were talking about the importance of the entrepreneurial society and, or at least my generation likes to call the 1099 society, right? But entrepreneurialism and the opportunity for entrepreneurs to utilize this opportunity. And also, I believe that you said, sorry if I'm quoting you, not quoting you, but to the effect on Tone's interview that you don't think that all of the individuals that have launched alts are scammers, and some truly do believe in their projects and are not malevolent. So if we could combine both, Ugly, my question to you is actionable and actionability. What do you think would be an actionable situation that would potentially combine both? Would cleanse the system, still provide opportunities for entrepreneurs in the space to, especially in the developing world, yet ensure that Bitcoin and especially scammy alts are still seen as separate, and then to throw it as potentially therefore, if the system is cleansed, individuals are doing well, and the system is then hopefully price-wise moving forward. But what are your thoughts? Sorry, that was a mouthful.
Well, what I've termed this thing, and again, we don't, as two old geezers, we don't have to be politically correct. We can get by with anything that a lot of somebody your age can't get by with. But the way I define what's going on is we are witnessing the exit, okay? And now, if you create a word, this word, it's not just a word, it's not exit, it's not exit, but it has to be exit with a list and a weak risk. So it's an exit, okay? And that's what we're witnessing now, I believe, in the market. It's been a long time coming. We look at different things. I was never a super bear on the Bitcoin when it hit 6,000. I always said, no, you can keep buying it because the basis, the futures are way under. It's okay to buy it. But then everything changed real quick, and it went into a premium, and then we had this decaf stuff, and everything just kind of fit together. And now we've dropped, and we dropped fast and we dropped hard. And I think what you're asking me, I don't know. Is this going to be a long-term educational effort where we have to, and it might be where it'll take a year or a year and a half, and we're going to have a prolonged bear market and stay down here and really clean people out? Or are people going to pay attention? I mean, I don't know how many people will be watching the show, but the fundamentals are fantastic now, okay? It really is. And so I hope you're right, Tyler, and the market just goes down and goes down and bottoms out at 1,000. But, I don't know. Bitcoin's a funny thing. And I just, I'm not that bearish, particularly after we've dropped 2,000. Now that doesn't mean we can't go down immediately down to from 4,000 to 2,000, but you know, it's all going to be how quickly people get educated into thinking about the Bitcoin standard in the proper way. And it might happen faster than we thought. Hey, I was locked up for 11 years, okay? When I got out, one of the biggest surprises I found were all these people that suddenly understood Austrian economics. Most of them think they understand it, but I was just amazed because, I mean, I was all alone back there in 1973 or whenever it was. Not 73, 78. I didn't get into the gold business until 1978, I think. And so you just don't know how fast these things are going to change. And there is an art to persuasion, okay? And that's why we need some of this BitConnect passion. That's the one thing that's been lacking on Bitcoin. So hopefully this old goat will help contribute. If nothing else, I may not be right on my thinking a lot of times, but on the passion, that's where we need to have fun with this thing too. Because it's really fun. Bitcoin's really fun. It really is. And you don't put everything into Bitcoin. You put your savings in there. That's the way I treat it. And I'm saving. Now I've diversified. I don't have as much Bitcoin now as I had in December. I transferred a lot of it and purchased other assets because that's what this is for. And this is how we're going to grow this new economy. It's not going to come from the government programs. It's not going to come from, it's certainly not going to come from the crypto world because they don't get it. They still want to create something that's better than Bitcoin. Now, the faster we can persuade, and there's a lot of you guys out there that own these ICOs, hey, I welcome you back in the fold. I'm either the most qualified person in the world to talk to you guys or the most unqualified, okay? Because I didn't mean to cause harm to anyone, but I did, okay? And I was wrong, and I paid for it dearly. I did 11 years in various prisons. So that's really, you're not facing that because you created the funds to bail yourself out through the political system. But it doesn't make what you're doing any more right. Get out of this crap and start working on the Bitcoin standard. We are the Bitcoin standard bearers. It's a level playing field. Let's get busy and get to work and make this thing go. There's no limit to what can happen.
Thank you, Ugly. Question. Yeah, Tyler's giving you the thumbs up. Can you define when you're saying Bitcoin standard bearer, and then I'm going to turn it to Tyler of what you think about Ugly's new definition of the Bitcoin standard bearer, which I love.
Well, the way it came about is, and everybody learns the space differently. Originally, I believed in the competition of standards. I said, yeah, we have a whole lot of different, but then I saw how they developed, and then I think it was Vitalik Buterin, that's why I call it the exit. He developed this new platform. You call it the ICO scam platform that created all this new money. And it's been devastating, except for those, early people that created it. And they deserve, if there's to be justice, they deserve more justice than I got because they really created a lot of harm, okay? And I didn't get it originally because I owned Ethereum, when it was $1 or something, and then I started listening to Tone, and Tone sold it for $1.20. Because when I finally understood what he was getting at, but these things take a long time to develop and for people to learn, okay? And so that's the term Bitcoin maximalist was actually created by Vitalik Buterin, and it was derogatory. So, oh, well, you're against competition. You're against the free market. No, I'm not against the free market. at all. But the market's going to develop on a standard, and that's what this is. This is the Bitcoin standard. That doesn't preclude that another standard can't come along. It might, but it needs to be the longest chain, a limited supply with proof of work. You don't need to have an ICO. You don't have a pre-mine. This is why Bitcoin is so unique and why it is the Bitcoin standard. And all you guys that are in this ICO crap and all the crypto world need to get on board with being a Bitcoin standard bearer. Okay, because it's going to develop gold. It was crappy, shitty cash. I wrote an article about it. Most of you have probably been linked to, but the only time gold acted as cash was during the California gold rush. Other than that, it was crap. It never circulated. But all the coinage and all the world's transactions was based on the gold standard. F.A. Hayek wrote about a commodity standard. I never really understood, oh yeah, we can have competing standards, a gold standard and a commodity standard and a silver standard and a copper standard. But if you start reading them again, there's, no, it's going to be one standard. Now, he didn't know about this Bitcoin thing, but he did know we have to create a basket of commodities because that's a store of value, okay? But it would have to be on an index. And it still didn't have that one feature that Bitcoin has. And what is that feature? It's unconfiscatable. It can't be taken from you. That's the beauty of the thing, and that's what needs to be emphasized. And it's secure. It's secure because of that proof of work. And these people that want to do, oh, well, it's better than Bitcoin. This is cash. Go look and see how much cash was ever done on the gold standard. The only time gold ever acted as cash was during the California gold rush for a period of about 2 or 3 years in a unique society that only existed temporarily and quickly disappeared. And so these people that are promoting, you know, people, was Jimmy Song wrote that, he wrote that one article about, you know, it's stupid to use Bitcoin to buy things. I mean, hey, just put it on your credit card. It's very easy. And then at the end of the month, you sell enough Bitcoin to pay for your credit card. That's how you do it. And that's what it's going to work. And that's what's going to happen. All you guys that you've got these crappy projects, take all that effort that you're putting in that and put it in developing the Bitcoin standard. You can do it. I don't understand the developing. I've got to depend on other people for that. But what you need to do is develop on the standard. And that's how we're going to bail our way out of this. This is how we're going to have what I call a smooth monetary transition. And one thing that I want to ask you about, Tyler, because maybe you explained it in one of your scenarios, but what about the scenario of possible hyperinflation, a worldwide, you know, hyperinflation wave?
Yeah, that's, I don't consider that as a possible solution, but it is certainly a possible outcome. When I say there are 4 solutions that I understand to be viable, I'm talking strictly from the point of view that we would be able to keep the party going for maybe another generation or 2 or 3 or 4. This keeping the party going for 4 years or 5 years or 10 years just doesn't make it anymore. We need a revamping of the system. Now, if we don't, one way out of a problem that is deflationary, and that's what we're really talking about, is a deflationary pressure at this point, not an inflationary pressure. And remember what we said earlier in the show, that when you have interest rates up at 15.5% for US government bonds back in 1979, and they dropped for 40 years down to zero, that is deflation. And we didn't have inflationary pressure during that incredible run after Paul Volcker was able to put a bullet in the back of the head of the inflationary monster. And it caused tremendous dislocation. And a lot of people were very upset, but it worked. The flip side of that is what we saw in the Weimar Republic in Germany during the 1920s, or in Zimbabwe recently, or what almost happened in Italy, or what is beginning to happen in Argentina and Venezuela, which is the opposite of a deflationary pressure. It's inflationary pressure. And what tends to happen is governments are forced to even sell their gold in order to keep printing enough money to keep things going. And what happens then, in the example that Ugly and I used from World War II to the present, where the US dollar, the stablest currency in the world, lost 95% of its value, these other examples I've just used lost tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to billions of percentage points in terms of buying power. Certainly back in the Weimar Republic and these other examples. Now, what Ugly has asked is, are we risking that sort of thing on a worldwide basis? And my answer would be yes, but it's a country by country decision until it no longer is, until the network of central banks can no longer control what is going on. And by then it's too late. I don't believe that the brilliant people running those institutions would allow it to get to that point without imposing one of the four solutions I just talked about. Bitcoin, a gold standard, default on the debt, or growing out of it. Now, if they can come to the conclusion that Bitcoin equals growing out of the problem by cutting all of the inefficiencies of a fiat system out over a period of time under some kind of a mechanism, that would be the best of all solutions. Obviously, defaulting on the debt is the worst possible solution, and that could very easily result in a hyperinflation. First of all, tremendously deflationary, but then the results of that deflation would be just the opposite. It would turn into an inflation and a hyperinflation. And there's nothing the world can do about that any longer. We could do it back at Bretton Woods. We could do it by getting out of Bretton Woods in 1971 and letting central banks go crazy. We could get out of it by following Keynesian deficit spending, which we are great at, and so is every other country in the world. But there comes a terminal point, and it's a mathematical point, and we are reaching it very, very quickly. I go back to what Ugly said. Unconfiscatability. Tone picked the topic for his conference in January after filtering out all of the things that are going on in our world of crypto and getting to the essence of what Ugly is talking about. Even in the United States, the one thing that people thought would never be confiscatable would be gold. And of course, that's exactly what happened back in the 1930s in the Great Depression.
Even a more relevant example is nobody thought that your bank account would just be arbitrarily closed or shut down.
Exactly.
That's happening all the time now, particularly if you've been in Bitcoin. I've had, what, 5 or 6 bank accounts shut down. And, you just need to understand that's the nature of this beast. And the reason I brought up the hyperinflation is because if we have the hyperinflation, traditionally that's when, you have a Stalin or Hitler or, a one world come in. And to me, Bitcoin is the bulwark. It's the one thing that we will have that can maintain an orderly society, which is, Bitcoin is an orderly, sound money, and we have to have an orderly society, or we're going to lose the wonderful blessings that we have had through technological developments the last 100 to 200 years.
Yep.
Now I'm going to jump in on you gentlemen here because Bitcoin has broke 4K. And I actually would love to hear, and this is selfish, but if I could, I'm going to pull up the chart on TradingView. And something that I think would be very interesting for everybody, and myself included, is to see how both of you guys are viewing the situation, because you guys are very different traders. You, in your most recent article, called yourself a position trader, Ugly. Tyler views himself as an investor. You guys see things very differently. So I would love to see what you guys think. Am I allowed to take the reins and do this for a second?
Absolutely. That's great. I'm going to jump in here because I know both Tone and others have thought that we could hold the 4,900, the 4,400, the 4,200, and we're now trading at 38.26. Hyperwave says that we are going down to 1,000, and there's nothing magic about any technical system, including Hyperwave. It's only that because no one knows or understands Hyperwave, it doesn't have the same effect as a technical system that other technical systems where you have thousands or tens of thousands of people using that technical system. What that does is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy with many technical trading systems that if you break such and such a head and shoulders or a triangle or a moving average or a trend line or a Fibonacci number, so many people are looking at that if you're the last one to run to the other side of the boat, you end up getting flipped off of the boat. Whereas Hyperwave, one of the reasons I kept it under wraps for 40 years is purely selfish. I just wanted to use it for clients and for my institutional work and my own work. But Leah and I thought that Bitcoin was so important as a new asset class, and people in the space didn't seem to understand that the implications of Hyperwave, or the trend is your friend, is no matter what you put your fiat money in, you must realize that you've just moved from something that is very, very safe to something that is less safe. Now, we're not talking about 30 years from now. We're talking about tomorrow morning. We're talking about when you move from cash into stocks, you have just greatly increased your risk. Therefore, you must watch those stocks and those indexes, those currencies, that gold, that silver, and yes, even that Bitcoin very, very closely. Because what you want to do is you want to have as much cash as possible when the next turn comes. And at $20,000, that's simply as far as that particular trend was able to go. And therefore at 17 or at 15 or at 12 or 9 or 7 or 6 or 4, or I believe all the way down to 1 is not the time to be pretending that this trend is going to overnight turn around. Maybe it will. Lee and I hope that it does. We hope that the target at 3,000 that comes off of Tone's triangle is going to be the terminal point. But I've told clients not to buy it at that level until we know the trend has changed. Anyone that would argue that cryptocurrencies in general and Bitcoin specifically is not in a downtrend either bought in at such a low price that it doesn't matter to them what the trend is, and that's the true hodler. But people that are getting in today or got in at 1,000 or 2,000 or 5 or 8 or 10 or 15 needed to have gotten out a long time ago. So I would love to say that this is a shocking development so soon after we broke 6,000, but it is not to me because of some of these tools that we use.
Yeah, the only thing that in Bitcoin, it just happens so much faster. I mean, you and I both witnessed the hunt bubble, and you know where silver went to $50 or $60, and then eventually went all the way down to 6.
Right.
But it took years for it to do that. I mean, originally the initial up came down very quickly. From I don't know, $7 or $8 up to 50 or 60, and it went down all the way back down to 10 or 15, and then bounced and bounced and bounced, but slowly just weaseled its way all the way down to $5 or $6.
Right.
And yeah, I see that. I kind of surprised me. I don't think. I think that this week, the close this week is important. But I also think that if it closes down here, that probably is going to take care of it. But how, like now you got panic. How are we going to, what do we have to do to blow these? There's somebody out there too that's going to get blown out. One of the big names in Bitcoin, and we don't know who it is. But somebody's in big trouble right now.
Well, and very probably many somebodies, certainly anybody on the institutional side that has tiptoed in over the last year, they're getting their heads handed to them. But also a number of whales. Whales fall into a lot of categories for me. An institution can be a whale, an individual can be a whale, a miner can be a whale, an exchange can be a whale. And because all of those things I just mentioned are unregulated in this space, 5 or 6 people working together, when things are going good, 1 or 2 or 3 of those people might be yelling uncle. And that causes tremendous disruption within institutional circles. If there's only one person that happens to hold a lot, they can be convinced that under any circumstance, they're never going to sell. But that's not who panics in situations like this. And what was so important about that 6,000 bottom was it tried so many times between 5,800 and 6,200 to provide support. That support was coming from hundreds, maybe thousands of sources. And any one of those sources, after we broke down through 6,000, all of a sudden began losing large sums of money. So now they're in a position where they're hoping for the next bottom and the next bottom and the next bottom. And that's why bear markets are always so much more dangerous in terms of the speed with which they get to where they're going as compared to bull markets. And why in the US stock market, we are so nervous right now because the 10-year bull market is showing signs of weakening. But I appreciate very much what Ugly is saying about this market right now. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but I've been through so many of these, from gold and silver in the 1987 stock market crash, and the crash in the dot-com bubbles, and the crash in the mortgages. Every one of those things were hyperwaves. The crash in the Japanese stock market was a hyperwave. And in each case, the endpoints were the same. And the only reason we've been pounding the table since last December isn't because we don't believe in the thing, Bitcoin. It's because the formation that has occurred is one that rarely occurs. And when it does, you've got to sit up and take notice. And now I think more and more people are going to sit up and take notice.
So Ugly, if I could jump in and put you on the spot, what are the best trades you've ever made and the worst trades you've ever made? And how can we learn from those and take those forward to trading or investing or understanding the Bitcoin asset class?
Well, the best trade by far that I made was just accumulating and buying Bitcoin beginning in 2013. And that's hands down because, I literally, I started out with nothing, and it worked treated me very well. As far as the worst trade, I don't know. I made so many bad ones. It's hard. But I think the hardest thing probably for me was I was caught up, with a gold bug. And back there in the, after the peak in 1980, people thought gold was going to go to $3,000, $6,000. I mean, that's what, it just kept on going down and down and down, and went down, from 1980 all the way till 2001.
Yeah.
And so that was, people just don't understand the magnitude of, they get caught up one way and then they don't understand, when it goes the other way. And particularly if you have one way of looking at things, and that's the good thing that I see about you, Tyler, is that you have that ability to distinguish, and through your hyperwave, what a bull market and a bear market is. In fact, we were talking this before the show. I'm sure he's dead now, but there's an old time trader by the name of Ted Warren. And he only had about an 8th grade education. But when I first saw what Tyler's work is all about, I said, you know what? I bet you he knows Ted Warren, because that is exactly what Tyler Jenks' Hyperwave Theory is, a very sophisticated development of what Ted Warren taught. Now, he was he was an old geezer, a funny old geezer, because he believed all the markets were manipulated, but it was stock, and then sort of there's insider knowledge on the way it was, but it was always funny because he was talking about here's the manipulators are accumulating. But he was always looking for that hyperwave move. And then he always said, this is where you buy it and this is where you sell it. And what Tyler has done is taken something that's really not that difficult to understand and simplified it and giving us ways to measure it. And it's not complicated like the Elliott wave. I mean, I've studied Elliott wave, and I threw it out the window as soon as I saw it. It was not a good system. But the hyperwave system that he's developed is very simple, and anybody can understand it. Now, how it develops, that's what he is doing now. You have what your consensus, where you're looking at all the moving averages. And I never thought of moving averages that way until I heard you talking about it. So one book that I would recommend that you purchase and read, there's one of them called The Art of Execution, and I think the other one that I would recommend to the average trader would just be Ted Warren's book. I don't know the name of it. Do you remember the name of his book?
Well, he's got 4 or 5 out. In fact, after you and I spoke, after Tone Show, I ordered them all from Amazon because I had remembered years ago looking at, someone mentioned it to me, and I got a hold of one of the books, and we will find those books and we will put them, we will get that out to everybody, maybe in a tweet, because they are fascinating. And I'd like to expand on that a little bit because right before the show, Ugly and I were just talking about who our mentors were. And I think it's so important in this business, meaning the business of finance, the business of investing and understanding the macroeconomic situation, right down to the micro checkbook, writing a check out to a brokerage firm to buy an asset and everything in between. It's way too much for anybody to learn on themselves. It takes people like Ugly and myself 40 years, and we keep making mistakes, as everybody does. But this medium of YouTube and social networking is such a wonderful platform to be able to find those people that you relate to, that you hear, and it rings a chime in your soul, in your spirit, that what they are saying, they are talking to me and I understand it. And if that doesn't occur, you can move on to the next one and the next one until you find those people that you know more than you do, and learn almost instantly things that it's taken old geezers like us more years than most of you have been born to accumulate this thing called experience. And experience is made up of successes as well as tremendous failures, huge disappointments, as well as just spectacular opportunities and gains for your family and yourself and people that you're influencing. So that's one of the reasons Leah thought it would be such a great idea for Ugly and I to get together to just kind of share some of those things. I too, as Ugly has gone through, have had some great, my best trade ever was because I had a mentor that I never spoke with, but I followed very closely, whose name was John Templeton, who came up with the Templeton Funds, and then he became one of the world's largest philanthropists and gave all of this money away, which was billions and billions and billions of dollars that he had made through smart investing. I read something that he had written about a little company that Ugly Old Goat knows probably better than anyone, that was called Telefonos de Mexico. And when I read about it at the end of the 1970s, I had no money at all, but I had a little IRA, and I put everything I had into Telefonos de Mexico because John Templeton told me to in one of his prospectuses for one of his international funds. At the time, the stock was trading at 20 cents. It wasn't even, it was a penny stock. And the thing that I jumped on was the fact that Templeton had figured out, and he was a fundamental analyst purely, figured out that this thing paid a 25% stock dividend every year and had for many, many years. And it was well covered. And because of that, I knew that I was going to double my money every 3.5 years just by owning that company. What I didn't realize is it was going to become one of the great telephone companies in the world, and the price is going to go from 20 cents to 40 to 60 to 80 to $1 to $2 to $4, and then split and split and split. All the while, I was getting 25% stock dividend a year. So that was my greatest success ever, as just making a decision It's not because I did any research, but I knew who knew, and I followed that lead, and it worked terrifically well. And I could list for every one of those kind of stories, 5 in which everything went wrong. My own analysis, the analysis of a mentor that I was following, just didn't work out. And that's what you learn. And that's why money management is so critical. It's not being right all the time, or not being
Manage your funds. That's the whole secret to success. And people, if you're asking yourself where the market's going, or if you feel like you need to be right or wrong, you're not, you don't get it yet. The whole thing is managing that money. It doesn't matter which side of the trade you're on. You can be completely opposite of me and still do quite well, but you have to understand how to manage that risk. All the technical stuff is great, but without the money management, it does you more harm than good, because you think the technical make you think you know something and you don't. Technical indicators are just that, they're indicators, and they're no more than that.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. That was actually a lesson that my mentor advisor and luckily business partner over here, Tyler, was teaching me right prior to the show. And gentlemen, we are going on 90 minutes. So I am going to be the bad millennial here and potentially cut you guys off. And it does, what you guys were talking about reminds me of 2 things, if I can be an obnoxious little humanities bachelor's degree, although it was politics and economics, which is 1, it reminds me of what Immanuel Kant once said, which is that you are most free in the exact moment that you make a decision. And to be able to trade, to be able to invest, everything that you guys are saying are just reminding me of the facts that the freedom that comes with you guys being able to make those executive decisions. Tyler, you guys are talking about money management, and Tyler managing an asset management firm with people's retirement accounts. And that's why GBTC, hence being able to make these very large decisions with other people's money and taking care of them. That takes a lot of cojones and an ugly old goat with your very particular trading style as well. A lot of cojones as well, which must feel, and this is my assumption for you guys, quite freeing. And then I will end with one last quote, I promise, and then I'll switch it back to you guys. My favorite quote that you guys are also remind me of, which is Frederick Buchner, if you guys know. And he said, 1 life on this earth is all that we get, whether it's enough or not enough. And the obvious conclusion would seem to be that at the very least, we are fools if we do not live it as fully, bravely, and beautifully as we can. And I just think that kind of everything you guys are talking about I'm totally going to get you back on the show, Ugly, because I wanted to hear more about your particular story. Tyler has a crazy one of his gold business. I know yours must have been crazy as well. But for all of us fools in Bitcoin, at least we're it's kind of a brave new world that we love and are having freedom in. So last thoughts, Sir Ugly, our Bitcoin bearer?
I don't know where we're going to go on this drop, but I do think that I'm not super bearish here. I think that regardless of the drop, tomorrow close, you can probably buy it. I might be wrong, but I maybe we're going to go all the way down to 1,000, but and you should wait till there's some indication of a turn. But now we are getting a final washout. This is what we need. I don't know, what point here that we're going to hold. Nobody does. But I do think that this week is very critical. And on tone-based trading signal, I think if you go to the BitMEX, it's on a 9 right now, or tomorrow will be a 9. But the problem with those things is it's a dynamic indicator. So there can be a great big difference between the beginning of a 9 and the end of the 9. I mean, the end of the 9 could be down to 1,000. Nobody knows right now. And that's one of the problems. I mean, I like the timing indicator, but it's really not something that you can depend on. And I don't really like trading on it. You trade, I think you need to trade with other things because it's really dynamic. It changes too. It can be a 9 and then not be a 9 later on. The numbers change because it changes with the market. So, but I do think this is the best thing that can happen to Bitcoin. It's been a long time in the making. I said, look, what we need is this market to break and break hard and, go down. And, whether or not it's going to come up right away, it doesn't look like it now. It might. If it stays down here for a long time, actually, that's the healthiest thing. It'll give a lot of new people the chance to accumulate Bitcoin. And the next wave up is just going to be a much bigger wave than we've seen before. That's the way I see it. And we'll just, right now, it's hard to believe that, but the worst thing that could happen in my mind is if we had gone up substantially from that 6,000 level. Because then the ICO scams would have probably continued. We're gonna, things are gonna change radically. I mean, it really is. And the crypto world will probably become a joke, but the Bitcoin standard will not. And the Bitcoin standard bearers, we're gonna come out of this on top. And I think people are gonna start looking. That's the biggest thing right now that I see. And that's where our hope is on getting a smooth monetary transition. And I think the garbage is getting cleaned out, and that's what we need. And the true believers that believe in sound money, and that's what Tyler, Jenks, and I are all about. We're not about these ICOs. We're asking, what is sound money? And the only sound money, the only hope of sound money is going to be the Bitcoin standard. And it's the standard because it is the longest chain. It has a limited supply and it's based on proof of work. And once you can get that through your head, and it can't be taken from you, and the more and more people that understand that, and the more and more people that we, frankly, there's going to be a lot of these people that are working for ICOs that are going to be out of jobs. Well, you know what? I'm going to start working on the Bitcoin standard because that's where it's at.
Thank you, Ugly. And Tyler, you overlay around 49 different indicators. Yes, I would love to hear your last thoughts here on the fact that we just brought up TradingView and it just broke. And what are your last thoughts on this awesome stream with Ugly?
This has really been enjoyable for me, and we will definitely do it again, hopefully many times, because there's so much I want to learn from Ugly, and I think I've got some interesting perspectives that will help him, and that's what everybody needs to do. We are not islands unto ourselves. The problem in the past has been communication. We can do that now. We can do it with many of you. Leah and I have an upcoming webinar. We're changing the date on that because there's a lot of preparation that's going to take. Leah and I will be in Washington, D.C. at the Elite Conference this coming weekend. But Ugly mentioned about the unconfiscatable conference. There aren't a lot of tickets left. And this is going to be an opportunity to sit, forget the poker, which is going to be a heck of a lot of fun. I love poker. Forget even the various talks that are going to take place. Leah and I will do a Hyperwave presentation for the first time in public. Ugly is going to join us all. The number of people, Saifedean and Tone and Venzen and Trace Mayer and Todd and on and on and on. You're going to be able to sit around for 4 days with people that you would like to talk with directly and have a lot of fun with and learn a tremendous amount about. And remember, this is the unconfiscatable. This is Bitcoin only. This is what Ugly was talking about. What happens with these movements of price up and down, that's a different story. The fundamentals behind this thing that we're all talking about are going to be with us for the rest of our lives and generations to come, in my personal opinion. What happens between now and do we go down to 3,000 or 1,000? I have my tools. I've got my opinions. I hope they are wrong. I hope we turn around right here. We'll get right back in if I've got some signals from another system we call Consensio, and we'll ride it with everybody else all the way up and probably never sell it again. Until that happens, I still believe, unfortunately, that we are going all the way down, and it's going to take that to cleanse the system out. And it will take longer than we want it to take, and it will go lower than we want it to go. But that's a personal opinion by one person who has often been wrong in the past. I hope I am wrong this time. I just don't believe it. And therefore, I'm not going to act on it. And I'm not going to recommend to people to act on anything other than that conclusion until that conclusion is proven wrong. Thank you all for joining us. Ugly, thank you so much. That was one of the best sessions that we have ever had, and I appreciate you taking the time, and you look very dapper.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Now, I was just looking at the bit wisdom chart, and that BTC and E, it says 2546. I've always thought, you know, it's been up there forever. And I was, you know what, someday we're going to go back down to there.
That is a very good point. Maybe that's what all this stuff has been waiting for, is just to go back and correct Bitcoin wisdom.
Hey, Ugly, can I ask a favor from you as we're signing out? Can you do your dancing song one last time? Because you said we need a little bit more pep.
All right,
And then we'll close it.
enthusiasm. And as we're having fun witnessing the exit. All right.
I like your setup so much.
There
If
we
anyone
go.
wants to go fund us. All right. Let's see.
Ho, save, build a, sound money. All right.
Great, thank you, Ugly.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much, Ugly.
Bye-bye.
Bye.